Dr. Hana Kim stepped off the transport ship onto the cold, dead surface of the third planet in the Sol system. Her thick environmental suit protected her from the harsh vacuum of space. The planet had no atmosphere left, just empty rock and dust stretching to the horizon. Behind her, 5 other members of the Galactic Consortium archaeological team began unloading their equipment. "Another dead world," muttered Tai Min as he carried his scanning equipment down the ship's ramp. "Why do we always get sent to these empty places?" Hana ignored his complaint and looked around at the barren landscape. Small hills of rubble dotted the area, and strange metal structures poked up from the ground like broken teeth. According to their mission briefing, this planet had once been home to a species called humans. Now it was just another tomb in space. "Start the deep scans," Hana ordered. "We need to know how long this place has been dead." G1 activated her equipment and watched the numbers appear on her screen. "Carbon dating shows the organic material died about 500 years ago," she reported. "Whatever happened here, it happened fast." The team spread out across the site, each member focusing on their specialty. Dong-Su examined what looked like the remains of buildings while Kyung-Ho used ground-penetrating scanners to map underground structures. Soo-Jin collected samples of metal and plastic debris scattered across the surface. Hana knelt beside a pile of white objects half buried in the dusty ground. She brushed away the dirt and revealed a collection of bones. They were clearly from intelligent beings. The skull showed signs of a large brain, and the hand bones suggested the ability to use complex tools. "Found the remains of the natives," she called out. "Species appears to have been bipedal, similar height to most consortium races." As she examined the bones more closely, Hana noticed something odd. The skeleton showed no signs of disease or malnutrition. These beings had been healthy when they died. She made a note in her report and continued her examination. Nearby, Dong Su was studying the ruins of what appeared to be a settlement. The buildings were crude and simple, made from basic metal sheets welded together. The construction methods were primitive, exactly what you would expect from a species that had just learned to work with metal. "These people were not very advanced," he said, recording images of the structures. "Basic metallurgy, simple construction techniques. They probably just learned to make tools when something went wrong." Tae Min found the remains of several vehicles scattered around the site. They were clearly designed for space travel, but the technology was elementary. Simple chemical rockets, basic life support systems, and crude navigation equipment. They barely made it off their home planet, he observed. "These ships could maybe reach the next planet in their system, but that's about it." As the day continued, a picture began to form of the humans' final days. The evidence suggested a civilization that had advanced too quickly for its own good. Scorch marks on the buildings indicated warfare. The environmental readings showed signs of massive pollution. The scattered nature of the remains suggested panic and hasty evacuation attempts. G1 discovered a cluster of what looked like weapons, simple projectile launchers and basic energy weapons. They were crude but effective, the kind of weapons a species might develop when it first learned to fight with technology instead of just claws and teeth. "They turned their tools into weapons," she said sadly. "Classic pattern for a failing civilization?" Hana nodded as she examined more skeletal remains. Every dead world told the same story. A species would develop technology faster than wisdom, and eventually that technology would destroy them. War, pollution, resource depletion. There were many ways for a civilization to end itself. "How many more like this are out there?" asked Kyung-Ho as he packed away his scanning equipment. "How many species destroyed themselves before they could join the galaxy?" "Too many," Hana replied. "That's why the consortium exists, to prevent this from happening to others." As the team prepared to return to their ship for the night, Soo-Jin made one final discovery. Half buried under a collapsed wall, she found what looked like a primitive computer terminal. The screen was cracked and dark, but the basic design was recognizable. "They had computers," she announced. "Very simple ones, but they were trying to develop information technology." Hana looked at the broken device and felt a familiar sadness. These humans had been so close to making it, Just a few more centuries of careful development, and they might have survived long enough to join the galactic community. Instead, they had rushed ahead without thinking and paid the ultimate price. Another lesson for the archives, she said, quietly. Mark this world as a standard Type 7 extinction event. Technological advancement exceeded social development, resulting in self-destruction through warfare and environmental collapse. The team boarded their ship as the planets sunset on another day of cataloging failure. Tomorrow they would continue documenting the remains of the humans, adding their story to the long list of species that had reached for the stars but fallen short. In the cold darkness of space, the dead world continued its silent orbit, keeping its secrets buried beneath layers of dust and time. 3 days had passed since the team began their work on the dead human world. G1 had been assigned the boring job of cataloging the simple tools they found scattered around the ruins. She was supposed to scan each item, record its basic properties, and pack it away for later study. It was not exciting work, but someone had to do it. On the morning of the 4th day, G1 picked up what looked like an ordinary metal rod. It was about as long as her arm and appeared to be some kind of basic tool, maybe used for prying things apart or as a simple lever. She placed it under her scanner and waited for the usual readings. The numbers that appeared on her screen made her blink in confusion. She ran the scan again, thinking her equipment might be broken. The same impossible results appeared. That cannot be right, she muttered to herself. According to her scanner, the metal rod was made from materials that did not exist in any known database. The molecular structure showed strength levels that were far beyond anything the consortium had ever developed. This simple-looking tool could apparently withstand forces that would crush their best military equipment. G1 looked around nervously. Dr. Kim was examining bones on the other side of the site, and the rest of the team was busy with their own work. She decided to test a few more items before saying anything. The next tool she scanned was a small cutting device that looked like something a primitive craftsman might use. Again, her scanner gave impossible readings. The edge of the blade showed atomic-level precision that current consortium technology could not achieve. The handle contained traces of materials that her database simply could not identify. "This is very strange," G1 whispered. She spent the rest of the morning secretly, testing more human tools. Every single item told the same story. Things that looked crude and simple were actually made with technology far more advanced than anything she had ever seen. When the team stopped for lunch, G1 approached Tai Min. He was friendly, and might listen to her concerns without getting angry. "I think there might be something wrong with my equipment," she said carefully. "I am getting very strange readings from the human tools." Tai Min looked up from his meal. "What kind of strange readings?" "The materials are showing as more advanced than our own technology. But that cannot be right, because these humans were clearly primitive." Tai Min frowned and pulled out his own scanner. "Let me check one of your samples." They walked over to G1's work area, and she handed him the metal rod. Tai Min ran his scanner over it and stared at the results. "Your equipment is fine," he said slowly. "I am getting the same readings. This material is definitely more advanced than anything we have." "But how is that possible?" G1 asked. "Look at how they lived. Simple buildings, basic vehicles, crude weapons. They were barely out of the Stone Age." Tai Min did not have an answer. He suggested they test more items together. Over the next hour, they discovered that almost every human tool showed the same impossible characteristics. Advanced materials disguised to look primitive. Construction, techniques that appeared simple but achieved results that modern science could not duplicate. "We should tell Dr. Kim about this," Tai Min said. They found Dr. Kim still working with the skeletal remains. When they explained their discoveries, she listened with a skeptical expression. "You are probably seeing contamination from previous expeditions," she said dismissively. "Other archaeological teams have been to many worlds in this system. They must have left some equipment behind." "But Dr. Kim," G1 protested, "we have tested dozens of items. They all show the same advanced materials. And look at this," she showed Dr. Kim a collection of weapon fragments that Dong Su had found. These blast patterns do not match the weapons we discovered. Something else destroyed these buildings, something much more powerful. Dr. Kim examined the evidence briefly, then shook her head. You are overthinking this, G1. We know what happened here. The humans developed technology too quickly and it destroyed them. Focus on your assigned work and stop chasing impossible theories. That evening, after the rest of the team had gone to sleep, Ji-won could not stop thinking about what she had discovered. She quietly returned to her work area and began running more detailed scans on the human artifacts. The deeper she looked, the more confused she became. The energy signatures in the destroyed buildings did not match any known weapon types. The construction methods used techniques that were completely unknown to consortium science. Even the way the humans had arranged their settlements showed a level of planning and engineering that contradicted everything else they had found. None of this makes sense, she said to herself. She pulled up the official reports about human civilization that had been filed by previous survey teams. According to those reports, humans had been a typical failed species. They had developed basic technology, fought wars, polluted their environment, and died out. It was a common story that had happened to thousands of species throughout the galaxy. But the evidence G1 was finding told a completely different story. These were not the remains of a primitive civilization that had destroyed itself. These were the carefully hidden traces of something much more advanced and much more dangerous. As she worked through the night, G1 began to realize that everything they thought they knew about the humans might be wrong, and if that was true, then the question was not what had happened to them, but where they had gone. On the 8th day of their excavation, Kyung-ho made a discovery that changed everything. His deep ground scanner had been mapping the underground areas beneath the human settlement when it detected something unusual. Far below the surface, there was a massive empty space that stretched for kilometers in every direction. Dr. Kim, you need to see this, Kyung-ho called out, staring at his scanner display. There is something big down there. Hana walked over and looked at the readings. The scanner showed a huge hollow area about 50 meters below their current dig site. It was not a natural cave. The walls were too straight and the angles too perfect. Someone had built this space. How did primitive humans dig so deep? Hana wondered aloud. They barely had metal tools. The team gathered around Kyung-ho's scanner, all looking at the strange readings. The underground space was enormous, much larger than anything they had found on the surface. It appeared to have multiple levels and connecting passages like a giant underground city. We need to find a way down there, Hana decided. Start looking for an entrance. It took them 2 hours of careful searching before Soo-jin found what they were looking for. Hidden beneath a pile of rubble was a shaft that led straight down into the darkness. The entrance had been sealed with a heavy metal cover, but centuries of weather had weakened the edges enough for them to pry it open. The shaft looks artificial, observed Dong-soo as he shined his light down into the hole. Someone built this as an access tunnel. Hana dropped a light stick down the shaft and watched it fall. It bounced off the walls several times before finally hitting the bottom, far below. At least 50 meters deep, she estimated. The team set up their climbing equipment and began the long descent into the underground facility. As they went deeper, Ji-won noticed something strange about the walls of the shaft. The construction is changing, she reported over the comm system. Near the surface, everything looks crude and simple, but down here the walls are much smoother. By the time they reached the bottom of the shaft, the walls had transformed completely. Instead of rough metal plates welded together, they were now looking at smooth, seamless surfaces that seemed to glow with their own soft light. This does not look primitive at all, whispered Tae-min. They found themselves standing before a massive door that blocked their path forward. The door was made from some kind of metal that none of them recognized. It had no visible handles, locks, or opening mechanisms. Stranger still, after 500 years of neglect, it showed no signs of rust, damage, or wear. How do we open it? Asked Minho. Soo-jin approached the door with her cutting tools. I will try to burn through it. It took 6 hours of continuous cutting with their most powerful equipment before they managed to create a hole large enough to crawl through. The door material was incredibly strong, much stronger than anything in their own technology. What they found on the other side made them all stop and stare in amazement. The underground facility was enormous. They stood in a vast hangar filled with sleek spacecraft that made consortium vessels look like children's toys. The ships were beautiful, with smooth curves and no visible joints or seams. They appeared to have been grown rather than built. "This is impossible," breathed Hana. "These ships are more advanced than anything we have ever seen." The walls of the hangar were lined with holographic displays that still flickered with data streams in the human language. Soft lights illuminated walkways that led deeper into the facility. The air itself hummed with energy from power sources that their scanners could not identify. Dongsu walked up to one of the spacecraft and ran his hand along its hull. There are no bolts, no welds, no fasteners of any kind. It is like it was made from a single piece of material. "Look at this," called out G1 from across the hangar. She had found a control panel covered with symbols and lights. When she touched one of the symbols, a holographic map appeared in the air above the panel, showing the layout of the entire underground complex. The facility was massive, stretching for kilometers in every direction. There were manufacturing areas, laboratories, living quarters, and storage bays. According to the map, they were standing in just one small section of a vast underground city. "How many people live down here?" wondered Kyung-ho. As they explored deeper into the facility, they found more wonders that defied explanation. Laboratories, filled with equipment that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Manufacturing bays that could apparently create any material at the atomic level. Computer systems that had been running continuously for 500 years without any maintenance. The surface settlements were fake, Hana realized as the truth began to dawn on her. The real human civilization was down here all along. Min found a room filled with what appeared to be historical records. Holographic displays showed images of humans working with advanced technology, traveling between stars, and interacting with other species throughout the galaxy. "They were not primitive at all," he said in amazement. "They were the most advanced species we have ever encountered." The team stood in the glowing underground facility, surrounded by technology that was centuries ahead of their own, and tried to understand what they had discovered. Everything they thought they knew about human civilization had been a lie. The question now was why the humans had wanted everyone to believe they were primitive, and where they had gone. Wu Jin had been working on the human computer systems for 2 days, trying to understand their strange technology. The computers were unlike anything he had ever seen. They did not use the standard interfaces that all consortium species had developed. Instead, they seemed to respond to touch, voice, and even thoughts in ways that should have been impossible. On the 3rd day, he finally managed to access their databases. What he found there made him call for the entire team to gather around the main display screen. "I have translated some of their records," Wu Jin announced as the team assembled. "But I do not think you are going to believe what they say." The holographic display came to life, showing images and text in the human language with consortium translations appearing below. The first files showed human spacecraft traveling between distant stars at speeds that exceeded anything the consortium had ever achieved. "Faster than light travel," read Haewon from the translated text. "They could cross the galaxy in days, not years." More images appeared, showing humans working with technologies that the consortium still considered theoretical. They could convert matter into energy and back again. They could transfer consciousness from one body to another. They could manipulate time and space in ways that seemed like magic. "This is impossible," muttered Dongsu. "No species could develop this level of technology. It would take millions of years." But the evidence kept appearing on the screen. Medical records showed humans curing diseases that had plagued other species for centuries. Engineering reports detailed construction projects that could reshape entire planets. Scientific papers described discoveries that rewrote the basic laws of physics. "They were not just advanced," whispered Sujin. "They were like gods compared to the rest of us." Wu Jin accessed another section of the database and the tone of the records began to change. These files dealt with human contact with other species throughout the galaxy. Instead of conquest and domination, they showed something completely different. "Look at this," said Minho, pointing to a series of diplomatic records. First contact protocols, peaceful trade agreements, technology sharing programs. They were trying to help everyone. The files revealed the truth about human expansion across the galaxy. Wherever they went, they brought gifts instead of weapons. They shared their advanced medical knowledge freely, ending plagues and genetic diseases that had killed billions. They provided clean energy sources to species that were destroying their own worlds with pollution. They stopped wars by giving both sides technology that made fighting unnecessary. They were making the galaxy a better place, said Young Su. His voice filled with wonder as he read through file after file of humanitarian missions. But then Wu Jin accessed a different section of the database, and the mood in the room changed completely. These were communication records between humans and something called the Early Galactic Consortium. "Wait," said Hana, reading the translated text. "The consortium existed back then, but our history says it was formed only 300 years ago." The records told a very different story. The Galactic Consortium had been formed 500 years ago, but not as the peaceful alliance of equals that current history claimed. It had been a military coalition created by several powerful species who felt threatened by human expansion. "Listen to this," Hana read from a consortium military briefing. "The human problem must be solved before they spread their dangerous ideas any further. Their concepts of equality and cooperation threaten the natural order of the galaxy." More files revealed the consortium's real concerns. Human technology was advancing so rapidly that other species could no longer compete. Human generosity was undermining established power structures throughout the galaxy. Most dangerous of all, human ideas about equality and cooperation were inspiring other species to question their own governments and social systems. They were afraid, realized Ji-won. The consortium leaders were afraid that humans would make their own power obsolete. The database contained detailed records of consortium meetings where species leaders discussed the human threat. They were not worried about human weapons or invasion fleets. They were terrified of human kindness and the way it was changing the galaxy for the better. "The humans were not conquering anyone," said Tae-min. "They were freeing everyone. And the old powers could not allow that to happen." The final set of files contained the consortium's ultimate solution to their human problem. Military plans, resource allocations, and timeline schedules for a coordinated attack on human colonies throughout the galaxy. The goal was not just to defeat the humans, but to completely erase them from history. "They succeeded," said Kyung-ho quietly. "The consortium destroyed human civilization and then rewrote history to make themselves look like heroes." But as Wu Jin continued searching through the database, he found something that made his blood run cold. The final human records were not from 500 years ago. They were recent, some dated as recently as the previous month. "The database is still active," he announced. "Someone has been updating these files. Someone has been watching us since we arrived." On the main display, a new message appeared in perfect consortium standard. "Archaeological team acknowledged. Data collection complete. Thank you for confirming current consortium membership and leadership structures. This information has been transmitted to the appropriate authorities." The team stood in stunned silence as they realized the truth. The humans had not been destroyed 500 years ago. They had been watching and waiting, and now they knew exactly who their enemies were. Sung-min had spent the entire night working with the human computer systems, and what he discovered in the deepest files made his hands shake as he called the team together one final time. The sun was rising over the dead world as the 6 archaeologists gathered around the main display, exhausted but unable to look away from what they were seeing. "I found the final records," Sung-min announced, his voice barely steady. "The humans knew everything. They saw the betrayal coming months before it happened." The holographic display showed a series of intelligence reports that painted a terrifying picture of human awareness. They had infiltrated consortium communications, analyzed behavioral patterns of government leaders, and run probability calculations that predicted the attack with frightening accuracy. "They had spies everywhere," breathed Dasam as she read through the translated files. "Every consortium meeting, every military planning session, every secret discussion about the human problem. The humans were listening to all of it. Ho pointed to a series of technical documents that appeared on screen. Look at these evacuation plans. They were not running away in panic. This was all carefully organized, planned months in advance. The truth was devastating in its simplicity. Every piece of evidence the archaeological team had found over the past week had been deliberately placed. The primitive settlements on the surface, the crude weapons, the signs of internal warfare, even the skeletal remains scattered around the ruins. All of it had been carefully constructed to create a false story. The dead bodies we found, Hana realized with growing horror. They were volunteers, people who gave their lives to make the deception believable. Sung Min accessed another file, and the display showed detailed construction plans for the underground facility. This place was never meant to be hidden forever. Look at the access shaft we found. It was designed to be discovered eventually, but only after enough time had passed. They wanted us to find this place, said Wu Jin. Everything we have learned here, they meant for us to learn it. The computer brought up a star map that showed hundreds of points of light scattered throughout the unexplored regions of the galaxy. Each point was labeled with coordinates and population numbers. As the team watched, more points appeared on the map, updating in real time. Those are human colonies, Sung Min explained. Hidden settlements throughout the galaxy, all of them, still active, all of them growing. Young Su stared at the map in amazement. There are thousands of them. How many humans are still alive out there? According to these records, more than ever, Sung Min replied. They have been breeding, building, and preparing for 500 years. The consortium thought they destroyed humanity, but they only made them stronger. The display changed again, showing technical specifications for spacecraft and weapons that made current consortium technology look like stone tools. The humans had not been sitting idle during their exile. They had continued, advancing, pushing their science and engineering far beyond what they had achieved before the war. They could destroy every consortium world in a matter of days, whispered Tae Min. Why have they waited so long? The answer came from the final set of files that Sung Min accessed. They were recent communications between human colonies, discussing something they called the grace period. The humans had decided to give the consortium 500 years to change, to become better, to perhaps evolve beyond the fear and jealousy that had led to the betrayal. They were hoping we would learn, said Ji-won. They gave us 5 centuries to become worthy of their forgiveness. But the communications also made it clear that the grace period was ending. Human leaders had been watching consortium development, and they were not impressed with what they saw. Wars still raged between member species. Inequality was worse than ever. The powerful still oppressed the weak, just as they had 500 years ago. As if responding to their discovery, the facility's main computer system suddenly came fully online. Lights blazed throughout the complex, and a gentle but firm voice spoke in perfect consortium standard. Archaeological team acknowledged. Identity confirmation complete. Data collection phase finished. The 500-year grace period has officially ended as of today. The team looked around nervously as systems throughout the facility began activating. Screens lit up with status reports, machinery hummed to life, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear the sound of massive doors opening. Beacon transmission successful, the voice continued. Exodus Fleet Command has been notified of current consortium composition and leadership structures. Fleet movement authorization granted. Estimated arrival time to consortium core worlds. 72 standard hours. Hana felt her legs go weak. They are coming back. Please remain calm, the voice said pleasantly. Your archaeological work has been very helpful in updating our intelligence files. You will be treated fairly, while Command decides what to do with current consortium leadership. In the depths of space, far beyond the reach of any consortium, sensors, ancient human vessels that had been drifting silently for 5 centuries suddenly came to life. Engines that had been sleeping began to wake. Weapon systems that had been dormant started their activation sequences, and throughout the hidden fleet, millions of humans who had never forgotten the betrayal of their ancestors began preparing for the journey home. The children of Earth were returning to reclaim their galaxy, and this time, they would not be so trusting.